Hey everyone, Temporal here, and for this session, we are going to be partially responding to a thread about Sombra that went up on Overwatch University. We're going to respond to that. It's really about, hey, why do people hate her? And we'll be covering why people don't like having her on their team and why people don't like playing against her, because people on ladder really don't much like either of those. But we're also going to go a bit further than that. We'll just use it as a general Sombra discussion. We'll go into how to ladder with her, should you ladder with her, what Overwatch does it fix her, does it make her worse, better? Does it hit her fundamental problems or that sort of thing? So if you guys are interested in that or have more Sombra questions or have other topics you want to cover about Sombra, let me know in chat there. But let's start by reading the thread here. And we see Sombra seems like one of the best heroes in the game, so why does everyone hate it? It? Sombra said it? You mean her? Okay, maybe there was regendering there and I wasn't clear. Even when the player isn't calling out hacks like they're supposed to, it still seems like a hero with tons of potential. They're not calling out hacks like they're supposed to for two reasons. A, you were never going to follow up on that hack in the first place, let's be serious. And B, for them to call out hacks, they'd have to be in voice chat. And if they were in voice chat, everyone would be saying Sombra switch. So community kind of made its bet on that one. But hey. Okay. She stops ults. She cancels practically every tank. She can basically frontline by hacking Ryan victims or backline and eliminate supports. I mean, hacking a backline support by herself doesn't necessarily mean that support gets eliminated, though, in Overwatch 1. In Overwatch 2, that's a little different, unless they retune her, which they probably will. But in Overwatch 1, hacking a support, unless she's coordinated with someone else, doesn't mean that support's going to get eliminated. Like, aha, congratulations, you hacked Anna. Great, Anna can still drive you off, especially if her Lucio is paying any level of attention or a Brig is paying any level of attention. And how long did you spend getting that hack? Did you spend 45 seconds trying to find the perfect opportunity to get that hack and go? No. Or if you either A, did that, or B, you went and did it, and your team wasn't pushing at the same time, so lots of people are able to turn, and Anna really only has to hold you off for a couple seconds before a bunch of her team is able to turn and deal with you, and you have a low damage weapon. High spread, low damage per bullet, you don't eliminate her terribly quickly. Now, if you coordinate up with a Tracer, it's amazing, and you absolutely destroy that Anna. But let's be honest, we're talking ladder, and also, if you're coordinating up with a Tracer, it is way more likely that the Anna has a support who's willing to protect them or something like that than it is that you, like, the bar of organization that is necessary on ladder to get a Sombra and a Tracer to pair up for dives is a higher bar than the bar of, oh right, most supports do figure out pretty low in the ladder, even with very low levels of support, that they need to protect each other, even if it's a Zen Anna protecting each other, which is far from optimal. They're going to figure that out at a much lower level and much easier level of coordination. It's easier for them to coordinate with each other even than a Sombra and Tracer too. But I'll continue. Okay. Uh-huh. And if a single other player is working with her, like a Moira or Reaper, she can methodically eliminate everyone on the field one by one. Not required, but it definitely makes those hacks even more OP. Moira as your dive partner with Sombra. That's not something I've seen a ton of. Is that the new Lucio Diva? We're going to send Moira and Sombra in together? I mean, it's doable, but the only place I really see it right now is six man, and in six man, everyone's your dive partner. You're a dive family. Um, Six man, of course, being the Diva, Winston, Moira, Lucio comp that'll run 2 DPS, some combination generally of Tracer, Sombra, and Reaper. And as you can imagine, everyone can dive in that. Okay. But you could duo queue with, I could see how you could duo queue with a Moira and really tilt the ladder pretty hard. When they get eliminated by a hero that they feel like has minimal aim mechanics in Moira plus Sombra, who can hack them, who comes out of stealth and hacks them from nowhere, and they don't have the reaction time to beat it, and then they get beat by a support plus a Sombra, I could see that being incredibly tilting. I could see that being pretty effective, actually, because it's so tilting. Not because it's good, but because it's tilting. Okay. Uh, Okay, and yet this might be one of the most hated heroes of them all, more than Bastion, Brig, even Widow. Sombra gets so much hate and blame. I've switched to Sombra, and even before appearing in a fight, I have people saying, I don't think Sombra is working here. Right, because they've had lots of bad experiences with Sombra. They have all had lots of bad experiences with Sombra, and I'll get into why in just a moment. They're clearly saying that because of either some past experience or some meta information about Sombra sucking that I don't understand. Well, it's not some past experience, it's like 80%, 90% of their past experiences with Sombra. Like, it's not some past experience, and they've pretty much all had that, is the thing. I don't accept the idea that she has to call out Hacks and Mike in order to be effective. She definitely doesn't. It does bring things to the next level, arguable, but she still has crazy strong abilities without it. It really doesn't bring things to the next level on ladder because your team isn't staged well enough to be able to engage on a dime if she's getting opening hacks. It's really better for her on ladder to just assume that her team is not going to engage on her hacks, and for her to instead, rather than going fishing for a hack, which is something that occasionally you will see happen in organized play, but is not even my preferred way to play her, for her to just assume that she's going to have to get the hack early into the fight. So a type of thing where, hey, the front lines meet, they start fighting, and then she hits the hack on Zen that has transcendence because she wants to lock that out. And what she's doing is she's going, hey, I don't want you to use transcendence. That is a thing that would be very annoying, but I don't think you're going to pop transcendence the instant the fight starts. So I'm going to 2-3 seconds into our Reinhardt swinging at each other, but before your Reinhardt gets to about 50%, that, once we started to drain some resources, that's when I'm going to hit the hack, and now we're going to run you over, etc., or delay this enough that your guys' plan breaks, you have to use some other ult, etc. Or, you can go with other things. Hey, she's going to hack the D.Va after the teams are already fighting to take away the D.Va's defense matrix, and now maybe her team goes for the ult because they realize they're hacked, or even if they don't, their Reinhardt gets knocked over because he doesn't have defense matrix, that sort of thing. So, you just assume that you have to let your team engage, and you be the secondary hit. You can be a very quick after thing, but it would be just like a poke DPS, a McCree late peeking, for example, where your front lines are fighting, and then you open your 90-degree angle that you went through Hotel on King's Row. You have something where the front lines are swinging at each other, Reinhardt swinging, those are fighting, and then the McCree went through Hotel and is shooting them in the side, but they late peaked this 1 second in, 2 seconds into the fight starting because they wanted attention to be pulled this way first. And you just have to assume you'll have to do the same thing with Sombra. Doesn't mean occasionally you'll be like, I'm going to hack Anna, but the instant the fight started, she threw both nade and sleep. Well, okay, you're not going to hack her now. Now you're just going to fight her because, hey, she doesn't have her abilities, and that's fine. Okay. So what's the deal? What are the cons of Sombra that make it so hated? So first we'll talk about, because this was more focused on when she's on your team, we'll talk about that first. And we've covered some of them, but her biggest and her most obvious con is low damage. Being low damage as a DPS hero on most of ladder is a cardinal sin. It's a cardinal sin to be low damage as a DPS hero for most of ladder that is kind of unrecoverable. And the reason for that is there's ways to win games with low damage. You can have high precision one shots like Widow. That's fine. But the Widows that you're going to have on low ladder aren't going to consistently be getting those one shots. They're just not accurate enough. Okay, how else can you get around low damage? Well, it's okay to be low damage. Like Genji's relatively low damage. It's okay to be low damage if you're bursty. You can go, hey, it can either be bursty, like you're something that doesn't do a ton of damage over time, but you can one-shot things, or you can combine damage with your teammates and you can burst. That is kind of the fundamental principle of how dive works, or at least used to work, where it's like, hey, let's get a Genji dash plus a Winston landing on something plus tracers one clip, and that'll be enough damage to do, let's say we'll get 250 damage out of that. That's more than 200 health. That'll deal with this, and as long as we're really synchronized, we'll take them out before meaningful healing comes in and we'll eliminate them. But if you don't get your elimination there, you're in trouble because you've spent your resources, you've done your job, you've been like, hey, we've used our resources, we didn't get the elimination, and now the sustain is going to beat us. We're not going to be able to outdo the healing that is coming in from the supports. Well, we better leave, go reset up, and then set up for another burst coordinated dive that's going to take people down. That sort of thing. So That's a way to overcome low damage. High precision on one-shots is a way to overcome low damage. But guess what? Those things are not really going to be present for the majority of ladder because high precision is a high ask, and high coordination is a high ask, and we've accept that most of ladder doesn't have that. They're not hitting good coordinated dives even when they're playing all dive heroes, and we also get that hey, the Widow isn't going to hit every shot, and part of why she's not going to hit every shot is low aim, but part of why she's not going to hit every shot is, again, the team doesn't understand how to enable her to how to open up sight lines. So that doesn't really make a ton of sense. So if you have a Sombra, you're in a situation where Sombra, low damage, plus, say, Genji, Mei, Widow. For most of ladder, getting any one of these people as your DPS partner, when you have this, basically means you don't have enough damage on your team. Now, that shouldn't be true when we've seen absolutely Sombra, Genji, Cyberdive. Fantastic combination. We used that to battle goats back when North America was still trying to resist the scourge of goats, the invasion that was tank and support play, then Cyberdive, which was a high ult power economy. You can beat goats if you can EMP them and then fight them, or you can beat goats if you can nanoblade them, and rotating between EMP one fight, nanoblade the other fight, that's really powerful and good. But guess what? That's a high ult-based comp, which is fine, but your team won't understand how to play around it on the ladder, and the damage from it is very low, and it works better at higher levels than it does at lower levels. But likewise, Sombra plus Mei, Sombra plus Widow, there's not enough damage, and if you don't have enough damage, you lose the easy win condition of we're going to do more damage than the other team's supports can heal. That's a slow win condition. It's not as good as one-shots. It's not as good as setting up good surrounds, hitting dives. It's not as good as lots of things that you could do, but it's a very easy to understand win condition. It comes over from, people who have played MMOs, things like that, who go, if I hurt the thing faster than it's healing, eventually we'll win. We can sort of out-resource it. That sort of thing. And that is strictly off the table, and it is a very easy way to play. So taking that off the table is going to hurt teams' win conditions or teams' win percentages because your team, again, ladder, everyone has a different idea of how to win the game or different ideas of how the game is supposed to be played, but that is one of the easiest, one of the most frequent ones that people are going for. It's made worse by supports for the level of, we'll just talk about medal ranks because, like it or not, medal ranks do make up most of ladder play. You guys can look up the percentages, but medal ranks, so that would be bronze, silver, gold, and platinum, do make up the majority of the ladder by quite a bit. And supports in these ranks frequently heal bot too much. In fact, it's also frequent at this rank to see double throughput healer, to see like Moira plus Ana, to see Ana plus BAP, things like that, and not bring in a main support its utility from like Lucio's speed boost, to not bring in a Zen for Discord Orb, to not bring in a to not go, hey, it doesn't matter, that's fine. So like, to not bring in a Brig for Peel, that sort of thing. So we look at these and go, hey, if we have higher healing than usual, not higher healing than usual because people really like their higher throughput healers in the lower ranks, and we also understand that people like heal botting in these lower ranks, you actually need even more damage conceptually. You don't need more total damage, but you need more damage conceptually. You don't have more damage than the higher ranks because your aim and mechanics aren't as good, and they're just like there sometimes isn't really more healing because, again, the mechanics aren't as good for the supports in lower ranks. But if you're having to heal through Moira plus Mercy, if you're having to heal through Moira plus Ana, let's go Moira plus Ana. If you're having to do damage through Moira plus Ana, and one of your damage dealers is Sombra, it's not going to be a terribly good time because, hey, that's like overwhelming heals isn't really going to be a thing when those two are on the board and this is here. But also, your team probably has something similar. Maybe you're playing into Moira plus Ana, but your team is playing, or maybe you're playing into BAP plus Ana, but your team is playing Moira plus Ana. They're probably not going to help very much in gold with getting damage done. Your supports aren't going to contribute much damage. That is something they get much better at as they go up, and some of them will do it, but you're not going to have a ton of, oh, my Ana's hitting a ton of anti-nades. Oh, we definitely have a Zen here that's getting Discord in there. Oh, our BAP is really weaving. No, they crutch in on their healing before they evolve to get that damage in most of the time, which again, if your support damage is low and you have Sombra Genji, Sombra Widow, things aren't going to go well. Overwhelming the other supports, getting those actual eliminations is going to be really, really hard. So that's like 85% of the ladder is metal rank, roughly. Yeah, exactly. So this low damage in a damage dealer position really is a cardinal sin. Would you even notice if you had Sombra plus Zen plus BAP plus, I don't know, let's go with Rhine plus, let's get another high damage dealer. Let's just, let's go like this. Let's just do Sigma and then Hanzo. If this was your team comp, yeah, if this was your team comp and these guys were constantly doing damage, no problem. No problem. We've got lots of damage here, no problem. Hey, this would work just fine. But you never know exactly what you're going to get. And, these things work in these comps, work in other comps. People have seen their Maze work in other comps. They've seen more success with some of these other heroes that Sombra could get more issue paired with. But again, you can absolutely get around these things, but that becomes a team level effort to do so. You can also just have good enough mechanics on Sombra that you outdamage the opponents. But hey, speaking of which, let's get into the next piece of why people really don't like playing with Sombra, or why her damage is low. We understand her damage is low in part because her spread is high and her damage per shot is pretty low, even though she has a pretty high fire rate. But the next thing that you get into is so many people still think that you play Sombra by running in loops. This is not the main playstyle of Sombra. It's not. This is not the main playstyle of Sombra. This was something that, hey, the thought when I talk about running in loops is, hey, your Sombra runs around the enemy team. She goes, hey, let me spend a bunch of time, put my translocator over here, run around the enemy team, unstealth, shoot at them until I feel I need to pop my translocator. Translocator gets popped. Now I sort of run around and wait for my translocator to come off of cooldown, put my translocator back down, then go back in and do it again. And people do that. And unfortunately, people do that regardless of what the team fight status is. That doesn't work. You do not actually get very much ult charge by running loops. By running loops, you'll pretty regularly, especially if you're attacking this team when this team is not fighting your team, get, I don't know, 6%, 3%, 8%, maybe 15% if you're lucky, before you get forced out. Because when a team is not distracted, it is very easy for any number of them to turn and go fight you. And that forces you out quite quickly, and you don't get very much ult charge. And then you have to go out, wait for, but it's not safe to go in again until you can lay your translocator again, and you've got to wait on that translocator cooldown. That doesn't work very well. On the flip side, if you go in and do this while your team is fighting, that's better. You'll be able to stay in for longer. You'll be able to get more. But if you force it too hard and you yourself get forced out, I mean, that's still much, much better. But now you're in a situation where if you let yourself get forced out because you got too aggressive, your team is now 5v6ing. So you don't want to go too aggressive with this and get yourself forced out too hard unless your team can easily disengage and knows that they should disengage, or you have someone like a Tracer, maybe like a Reaper or a Moira, as was talked about here, that can go in with you and you guys have a high probability of forcing the elimination. But your team understanding that they want to disengage when you're out, or they want to slow down the fight when you're out, that doesn't sound very much like a ladder thing right there. So how do you get around this? Because there is a place for loops. It's not very common, but it is a niche strategy that makes sense. But what you're generally looking to do is not to play loops on Sombra. No, I'm not going to do that yet. I will come back to how you actually play Sombra. But people do this and it's wrong. The very brief answer is take about a 45-degree off angle with her and shoot like that, or take high ground and shoot like that. Play in a place where your team can support you a little bit more. You'll be able to stay in for fights longer, and you'll actually put out a lot more damage. Basically, it's like a budget Soldier 76. But I'll come back to that with more detail. Don't worry. Thank you, Magdalena. It was a wonderful painting. It had lots of lines on it. It had lots of lines. Okay, so we covered, that's another reason that she gets low damage. She spends so little time fighting because many people are playing her wrong, both in organized play and ladder, but especially in ladder there. And that causes her low damage to get even lower, which makes her ineffective. We talked about the sin of low damage. Then we get into bad EMPs are super obvious. Sometimes a Dragon Blade gets shut down, and a Dragon Blade is a big ult in a lot of people's minds. And it's like, oh, hey, sometimes it gets shuts down. Maybe the Genji got slept. Maybe the Genji got flashbanged, hooked, whatever. Sometimes Dragon Blades get shut down. Actually, naked Dragon Blades get shut down quite frequently, but so be it. Sometimes a Brig rallies and it's a poor rally, and that rally really shouldn't have happened. You were winning too much, or you didn't actually need the rally. And sometimes, what's another top tier ult? You might see a barrage happen and your Pharah gets eliminated and only gets one, but hey, they did get an elimination. That's not a top tier ult, but we look at this and when we compare it to the other top tier ults, most of the time it is more forgivable for other people to mess up their ults. I'm just going to say those top tier ults, those tend to get glossed over and missed a little more by the team. When Sombra messes up her ult, it's super obvious because the Sombra's probably there in comms going, where was my follow-up? When they EMP'd 5 people when, the Sombra's entire team was in spawn. That's why it's super obvious. But B, people expect to win team fights with EMP. People really expect to win team fights with EMP. It's an incredibly powerful ult. It's probably the best DPS ult in the game. It's a very powerful one. People expect to win it. Sombras, unfortunately, have not figured out how to get the timing of that right in most cases. Now, if obviously good Sombras go, okay, I'm going to wait until my team starts to engage. Once my team has started to engage, I'm going to hit the EMP and then we're going to win. But teams on ladder don't understand off angles. They don't understand what's being waited for. They don't understand. They're going, Sombra, come group up. Sombra, why aren't you here? You're going to see that for not all of metal ranks, but some of the lower metal ranks for, hey, what's going on? Why isn't everyone stacked? We can't push until everyone is stacked, that sort of thing. Or you'll see them just trickling in one or two at a time, and the Sombra never has a fight that they can EMP, which should be true for every ult, but if Sombra can't get a successful ult because so much of her value as a hero is tied into getting good ults, an environment where she can't get good ults, either because her team is constantly trickling or because her team won't push, is a problem. And Sombras will, of course, try to get around this by getting frustrated and going, well, I'm not going to hold the EMP all match, I'm going to EMP first. But then their team spends half or even 3/4 of the time EMP was getting value rotating into the fight. So, super huge amount of her kit value is tied to her ults. Getting that good ult timing is in some ways harder. It's not actually harder than it is at higher ranks, but in some ways it's challenging at low ranks. At higher ranks, it's challenging as well because that precise ult window that you should be hitting, guess what? Someone else saw that precise ult window too. They saw it better and they reacted a little bit faster than you and they got their ult off first, or their ult is going. Are you still sure you want to ult? That sort of thing. But different thing. Okay. Okay. And then lastly, we talked about much of ladder doesn't understand the value of off angles. Sombra takes off angles really easily, but enough of ladder, again, we're talking the lower 3 metal ranks here, really mostly aren't understanding the value of off angles. So they're being like, hey, we have a Sombra that's making us weak. We'd so much rather have a Soldier 76 standing with the team. Where it's like, no, you don't. This Sombra on the off angle is providing additional pressure, but their team doesn't understand it. So, of course, they're going to go, this Sombra isn't helpful. They're not frontlining with us. They want front lines. That's why they obsess with, hey, we want our Reinhardt. We want our Orisa. The latter goes, hey, we want a main tank. We don't want Winston. And obviously they're wrong, but they don't understand how these off angles work and how different engagement strategies work. They want bulky, powerful front lines, and Sombra is definitely not that. She's a hero that goes, oh, it's a mouse, I'm scared, let me translocate out. Now, she doesn't have to go out quite, oh, it's a mouse, I'm scared, and translocate out, but she's definitely not a bulky, powerful front line. Even something like Genji, who's another diver, feels more bulky than Sombra, feels like they'll have more of a presence in the front line because they've got deflect. They can, dash through a bunch of things for damage and then potentially dash out. They feel a little more in the fight, that sort of thing. Okay. So that's kind of why no, that's not kind of. That is why people don't like playing with Lucia or with I'm reading chat, playing with Sombras. But people don't like playing against Sombra either. And that might seem weird, right? Because like if you hate having a Sombra on your team so much, it should feel like, "Oh, well if you hate having Sombra on your team, she must be bad." And if she's bad, her being on the other team must mean that you're going to win. And winning feels good, so people must love playing against Sombra. Well, no. And if you look at her kit, you're going to understand why. Like, losing control of your hero isn't fun. The Overwatch devs have figured that out. Now, some level of loss of control is necessary. This sort of gets into the, hey, are you going to have super fast, super mobile heroes? Then you either need to be able to one-shot them, or you need to be able to take away some level of control with stuns, with CC, things like that. And, it's how much, how little should be in the game is a valid question. We're moving into less of it, where most of our CC is going to be focused in the tank role in Overwatch 2. But Sombra contains a fair amount of control. She's got the ability to take away people's ability to use their abilities, and for a pretty long period of time. She can hack, EMP, rehack, and that's forever. But even just a hack, that's a lot of seconds without full use of your hero. You can still move, and for someone like Reaper, losing your abilities isn't that big a deal. But to someone like Wrecking Ball, to someone like Doomfist, losing your abilities is a big deal. To a Reinhardt who thinks they're supposed to be shield botting, losing your abilities are a big deal. To a diva, well, you're not diva if you don't have defense matrix. So it's a hero that takes away a lot of heroes' abilities to really contribute much to the game, and it does it for a long period of time. It really feels like an eternity because, it's not as bad of a takeaway as a stun. A stun might only stun you for 1 second instead of 6, but at least that's over pretty quickly. And you might be saying, well, hold on. They could just have Sombra like one-shot people like Widow or Hanzo does or Doomfist does, and like, how would that be better? Are you telling me people like loss of control less than they like just getting deleted? Well, all of those heroes, with the exception of Doomfist, have counterplay that most of the latter better understands. The average player has a much better understanding of Widow can't shoot me if I'm not in her line of sight. Now, some people will groan about, well, I'm not able to fight her if I'm not in her line of sight. That's a stupid solution. But at least there's some form of counterplay that they actually understand. Someone that comes out of stealth to hack you, someone that goes, yes, I am Sombra. I shall come out of stealth to hack you with rays of light that hack people apparently. Comes out of stealth to hack you, that is not going to make this person happy, because what's the counterplay to this person shows up out of stealth, they can hack me in less than a second, and how am I supposed to do anything about that? Well, at the highest level, it's really not that big a deal. If Sombra tries to hack you, just comes out of stealth and tries to hack you, Reinhardts will turn and put their shield up. Divas will turn and shoot them. Shoot them. Cassidy's will turn and shoot them. Tracers will turn and shoot them. Hanzos will turn and shoot them. Everyone will turn and shoot them, and most of the time they'll hit them, and even if they don't, their team will react reasonably, and that person's not in any real trouble if Sombra just tries to show up alone and hack them. Because at the upper parts of ladder, guess what? One of the things that is present for most people at the upper levels of ladder is their reaction times are pretty good. Yeah, there are differences between the top and bottom of ladder, and you're going to consistently find at the top of ladder, people's reaction times are better, so a Sombra just showing up and trying to hack them is a lot less annoying and a lot more preventable, because they've got the better reaction times, and they've also got the better aim. So the Cassidy, who's only got one shot to interrupt that, one chance to interrupt that Sombra before the hack goes off and has to hit their shot, will hit their shot. That's how that works. That's the top of ladder. Guess what? That Cassidy in plat misses that shot. That Cassidy in silver probably doesn't even turn in time. So he gets hacked. And that just doesn't feel good. So, like, the counterplay is appropriate for her at the top of ladder. She's still annoying, but that counterplay is appropriate, but it's really not appropriate as people get lower. And you can say, hey, that's true of everything. Like, people in GM play their corners better against Roadhog than they do in Silver. In Silver, they stand in the open and get hooked. But people can, even in Silver, kick themselves a little bit more and go, hey, I should have known better than that. They haven't built the habit to be playing on cover, to react to seeing a hog, even starting to look at them the way higher levels player have, but they at least understand what went wrong and they sort of understand how they could have done something about that. They really don't understand how they could have done something about the Sombra because the Hanzo can't hit that shot in time. The Hanzo who turns for the Sombra can't hit that shot in time. They simply don't have the reaction time or the aim to consistently pull that off. Hanzo might be not the best example because Hanzo gets hacked and goes, "Yeah, what's your point?" But hey, losing Storm Arrow hurts a little. Okay, so that happens. Now, again, this isn't the best way to hack with Sombra. I much prefer that you hack with Sombra when people are already engaged, especially on ladder, because you don't want, even if you get the hack on Sombra, the truth is, okay, you hacked someone, their team is still going to turn and deal with you long before you eliminate the person or do super meaningful damage to them, even in lower levels a lot of the time. But for the person that got hacked and feels like they can't do anything, them not getting eliminated still doesn't really feel better. It's still just like, hey, this isn't fun. This doesn't work. I don't like it. I can't do anything about this. And that sucks. So she has this thing that the counterplay for it is really just not something that's available to at least the bottom three medal ranks in a lot of situations. Uh, Even Plat will struggle with this some, where it's like, hey, Ryan, because Ryan mid-combat, did you turn and block the Sombra that was hacking you? No, you didn't, then you lose. In GM, they would have done it. The Ryan would have put their shield up and turned in time and interrupted the hack, but you didn't because you were swinging at the other Ryan and you didn't realize it, and you don't feel like you can realize it, that sort of thing. So, like, they feel like they can't do the counterplay, and here's the other thing, the counterplay is extremely unrewarding. Congratulations, you're Diva, and you shot a Sombra that was trying to hack someone. Congratulations, she lost her cooldown, right? No. She gets an abbreviated version of her cooldown back. Her cooldown comes back quite quickly, so it doesn't feel like she's punished meaningfully if you're the team that's defending against her for not getting her hack off. Now, again, we should conceptually understand that if she doesn't get her hack off, she now shouldn't be able to get a hack off, period, and she should get forced out. And that should mean now that she's forced out, she can't get a hack off. Any pressure is put on her. She has to translocate out. Let's go take a team fight with the other team while she's been forced out. And she either has to walk into that team fight without her translocator, in which case, if we see her, we'll eliminate her, or she's missing because her translocator was far away and she's not willing to re-enter the battle until she puts a translocator back down. Now, that's great for teams that understand that, but come on, let's be honest. How many times when a Sombra gets forced out, either because she gets found and forced out because her hack didn't go off, or because someone found and broke her translocator on ladder, in the vast majority of ladder, how often, when either a Sombra gets forced out or translator gets broken, does a team fight get forced with the other team? Yeah, not very often. So, again, very not rewarding counterplay for the team that is like, aha, we interrupted your hack and you can immediately re-hack again if we can't hit another shot. Like, let's say the Cassidy turns and Silver hits that Sombra. They hit them. Good for them. They hit that Sombra and interrupted the hack. And then the Sombra tries to hack them again and the Cassidy misses their next two shots. And, Cassidy's hacked again. That sucks. The counterplay doesn't feel rewarding. She was able to go for the hack. Same thing with, hey, we broke the translocator. In GM, if you're a GM Hammond and you're rolling around and you break a Sombra translocator, if that Sombra is freaking scared of you, not vice versa. That is not the case in lower levels because, again, your team is not going to fight. Your team is not going to go, oh, her translocator's broken, she gets deleted, that sort of thing. Like, the translocator break is effectively an elimination in high-level play, but it's not that lower on ladder, and that really is important for she doesn't feel good to play against because it's not rewarding enough to do the counterplay. Does it, James? Does it, James? Someone lying in bed with some BDSM going on? Okay, okay. That's not quite what it was, but hey. Maybe they're on the way to the grave there. So, again, We've got that. Not fun to play with her because her damage is low, and that is a cardinal sin. Not fun to play against her because losing control of your hero isn't fun. Interrupting her doesn't actually take her hack away for very long. Forcing her out doesn't actually get you an elimination on her. Breaking her translocator doesn't actually cause your team to then go fight her team and win the team fight. It doesn't feel good to play against her because she takes away your fun, but you don't get the reward, the positive, like, yes, that felt good, the dinks of, oh, she got eliminated, that feels good type thing. Or you don't understand, you also don't even understand how you're supposed to take her out in a lot of ways. Like what I just explained here of, hey, she's been forced out, go rush the team down. You probably don't even understand that if you're the average Overwatch player. That's not quite fair. Portions of the latter won't understand that, not the average Overwatch player, but your team as a whole definitely isn't going to understand that, or at the very least isn't going to execute upon that understanding because the coordination isn't there. So it just feels bad. So that sort of handles the main post here, which seems like one of the best hero. Why does everyone hate her? And hey, she takes away control. She isn't You don't get the rewards for playing against her. When you mess up a Doomfist, when you safely survive a Doomfist, you have a decent chance of eliminating him. He's another frustrating hero, but you have a decent chance of eliminating him. Okay, that works, that has counterplay. When a Roadhog is just messing you up, well, you understand you can use cover. That sort of thing works. But also these heroes, well, some of them won't get as much hate on their team because they do more consistent damage, at least the Roadhog and to a degree the Doomfist, and low damage is a cardinal sin from a damage dealer. So let's move on to should you ladder with her? And you won't get some of the key hack value, like blocking ults, like what I talked about earlier of, hey, we know that the ult that they can potentially win with is rally, so what we're going to do is we're going to hack them, and then we're going to force the fight while their rally is locked out. Or we know that the key ult they want to win with is Dragon Blade, Nano Blade. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit the hack on Ana, hit the hack on Genji, and then start the team fight. Like, you're not going to be able to do that, but that's not really the right way to start fights anyways. Usually you want to sort of stage to start the fight in a lot of ways, and then sort of go for the hack anyways. But yes, there is something to be said for you're not going to be able to use hack as a green light. Either to go, hey, let's hack Ana, she doesn't have the nade, now let's fight their front line, or hey, let's go ahead and hack their BAP. Now BAP doesn't have lamp. Now we hit our Maywall combo on your Reinhardt and you can't save your Reinhardt. Or, hey, we know that you're planning to Blizzard us right as we walk around this corner, so we hack your Mei, then we walk around the corner and fight you and drop our own Blizzard, that sort of thing. Like, yes, delaying the opponents being able to activate their win condition and knowing that your team will engage off of that is useful. And you can't really do that to the same degree. You can't greenlight really any pushes off of you hitting hacks. You have to hit your hacks when your team is already hitting the pushes for them to get value. You also have to accept that, hey, if we wanted to play her in organized play, you can't just play her in organized play. You have to get good at the hero on ladder, because the ladder is your gym. The ladder is what you play to get better at the game, because you scrim with your team Maybe you scrim with your team every day, but only for 2 hours. Maybe you scrim with your team twice a week. Whatever. You're probably playing more Overwatch than you are scrimming, by a significant margin, and your team is going to expect you, in most situations, to keep getting better at the game, and specifically to keep getting better at the heroes that you have to play in scrims. Keep working on your Tracer if you're the team's Tracer. Keep working on your Echo if you're not landing your stickies. Keep working on this because you got to keep getting better for the team to work, for the team to get better. Yes, the team's strategies can get better, the team's execution and teamwork can get better, but most teams are going to come with an expectation that the players are individually working on their heroes. And the place to do that, if you're a Team Sombra player, well, the place to do that for any player is on ladder. So it's not perfect practice to go transfer, but it does still get you some practice, some level of, hey, can you get your timings right? Hey, can you get more practice with her weapon play? Hey, you can learn people's behaviors a bit more. So ladder is something that you're going to have to do. So that would be an argument in its favor, Okay, we've got an argument against. She can't really green light the same way on ladder that she can, but the argument is, so Ladder, no ladder. Okay, so she can't really green light, but it's the only place to get practice with her. And as you can imagine, you're expected to practice with her is going to be a more important argument than you can't green light fights. You can't green light fights. And when I say green light, I sort of mean you become the team's go button. You become the one who you do something and then the team starts as a result of that. So, those things happen. Obviously, if you were to just one clip someone, eliminate them, get a pick, that would be greenlighting a fight. So obviously you can greenlight fights, but you're not going to be getting those hack greenlights. What else do we have here? So another reason to potentially ladder with her is you can tilt the other team pretty hard. We talked about all the reasons people hate playing against her. Well, guess what? People hate playing against her. You can win on ladder by tilting people. It's not the nicest thing to do in the world. People don't like it. It doesn't make the ladder a better place, but you can win by tilting people. Now, I'm not recommending that you guys go do that with chat. I'm not recommending that you guys go do that by finding people on Discord servers that you have in common and, messaging them through Discord and tilting them like that. Or I'm not mentioning you do, start saying, oh, report so-and-so for throwing when they're not, anything like that. But using gameplay mechanics to tilt people, that's totally within the rules. If you go, hey, I can see this person is having a bad game, they haven't really been able to get their engine going, and you keep picking on that person, that's a good thing to do for the sake of you want to exploit the weak link and take them out. But B, they're probably not going to get their self together and start playing well if they never have a chance to hit a few shots and fall into a rhythm. So if you can sort of keep picking on someone that's doing poorly, that's a pretty effective way to win games in Overwatch, especially as you go up the ladder and your players pool gets smaller and smaller. And Sombra's really good at picking at the same person over and over. Not every time go hack the exact same person because it gets too predictable and answers do come out, but you can go, hey, 2 out of 3 hacks are on this same person. Hey, I'm really not letting this person have any fun play the game at all. And that is a way to win the game. It's not nice, but it is a way to win the game. And that's kind of what Sombra does. And you can even focus someone harder than it makes sense for the sake of not letting them get their engine going, not letting them fall into their rhythm. And this is something that low-level players tend to not understand. They see that, hey, in the first team fight, their Genji got eliminated, so their Genji must be terrible, or their Hanzo missed a few shots, so their Hanzo must be terrible while the Mercy was boosting them. But the truth is, if you check back on them 2 minutes later, the Hanzo will be playing their standard game and they'll be getting average value, but the Mercy has already written them off and is heal-botting tanks rather than boosting the Hanzo. That happens because players sometimes take a bit to get going. Not everyone is doing serious warm-ups, and even when they are doing warm-ups, it still takes a little bit to get going sometimes. People are streaky in how they play, that sort of thing. If you can not let anyone get going, you can mess them up pretty effectively. Or if you can see that they just mess something up and then continue to pick on them, you can get some work done. James says, I did a thing where if one person in the enemy team was moaning in match chat, you would solo shadow them. Yeah, that would be a way to do it. Exactly. You got it. And people are going to be more vulnerable to tilt, I would say, on ladder than organized play. So again, that would be an argument in her favor in terms of using her on ladder. Might be an argument against using her on ladder too, because, oh wait, this is a thing where it makes the ladder worse, it makes everyone's experience worse, but hey, we like winning. The other thing that you're going to run into is Hammond is very common on ladder, and Doomfist can be very tilting to your team. So Hammond is common because Ball is meta right now. Great, that makes sense. And then Doomfist is certainly not meta, but he can be really annoying. Doomfist can be very sink or swim, but when he's swimming, he is going swimmingly. And obviously, people know that Sombra for most ranks does a pretty good job of shutting these heroes down. The match gets a little more interesting at high levels because at very high levels, again, Hammonds can hunt translocators, Hammonds can battle force space with their tracers a bit better, that sort of thing. But at lower levels, for most of the player base, Sombra does a very good job of controlling those heroes, and controlling those heroes will untilt your supports so much. Like, you prevent your supports from getting tilted. So we're into mind game Sombra, where you're controlling the enemy's team's emotions, you're controlling your team's emotions, but it has a lot of value to do that. It's not just emotions. If your Ana is not going to learn mid game, your Zen is not going to learn mid game how to deal with the enemy Doomfist. So you're going to have to do it yourself. But if you do, you can win. If that Doomfist can reliably, within the first 4 seconds of every fight, take out your Zen, your Ana, your BAP, whatever the case may be, you guys are going to lose a lot of team fights. But you can prevent that. That's a pretty good argument. Now, that's a swap into her argument. That is not a full-time run her argument, but it's definitely a, hey, she has a place. And your team is not going to be complaining about a Sombra, generally speaking, when there's a Doomfist on the other team. Usually even when there's a ball on the other team. Glad you enjoyed, Alexi. Okay. Okay. And then the last thing I'd get into in why she can make sense on ladder is at these lower levels. So we talked about off angles and staging, or we're going to talk about off angles and staging, where you might have your team down main, the enemy team is in front of you, and you can't exist with a Winston on an off angle forever. Winston will get forced out. Staging tends to be in more dangerous places than your core is in, and you can't hold staging forever. You'll start to take chip damage, and if you take too much chip damage, you're harder to sustain in those off angles. With Ana heals, with Zen heals, with Break heals, you're harder to sustain. So you sort of want to rotate into staging spots, recover quickly, and then go. But staging spots aren't things that you can long-term hold. That's kind of what staging is. It's like, hey, we have our safe spot, we rotate into staging, then we go hit our dive. And your engage is more powerful if you're hitting from more directions. Well, Winston, Tracer, Genji, D.Va, even heroes like, even just more standard off-angling stuff, an aggressive Sigma, a Hog, a Hanzo, Cassidy, those things can't stay in their staging forever either. For example, if we're pushing King's Row main, I'll just use that example, and your Cassidy goes into hotel early and he wants to late peek, well, he can't stay there forever. Eventually he'll get found, eventually he'll get forced out. So staging is temporary. Staging isn't very temporary for Sombra. Sombra can stay there as long as she wants, and we don't want her AFKing, but the fact that she doesn't get forced out as easily, but lets you keep this powerful staging angle, this powerful off angle, whatever we want to call this, when your team finally does engage, that she's ready, that she can do it, that she can be like, aha, now we've got this second angle, that is pretty good at those lower ranks where people get forced out, where your team is going to take a hot minute to figure out, well, are we ready to actually push? Now, on the flip side of that, of course, there's the thing of your team might go, oh, Sombra isn't with us, it's not time to push yet, or they might trickle forever. But even if they're trickling forever, if you can hold this angle, not go in hard and have to translocate out in 3 seconds, but hold this angle to do some damage, hold this angle to do some damage while your team is 3v6ing, you can get some good ult charge, you can get some work done, maybe you can get some eliminations that will cause eventually the trickle vest to go in your way. But the trick becomes to hold these angles gently rather than to be like, hey, I'm hard going in trying to eliminate them. To instead go, no, I'm doing this preferably from the high ground. That would be a great place to do it from. Preferably with cover, that sort of thing. So overall, I'm good with Ladder Sombra. Like, I'm good with Ladder Sombra just based on the single point of, hey, you have to practice it somewhere, and I think of the ladder of the gym, and that's the way to do it. But I hope you guys can see that there's actually some decent stuff she can get done here. The problem you run into is her low damage. Do not go running loops with her. In fact, let's get in how to play her. You do not want to run loops with her. You do not want to just go, hey, I run around the enemy team, I warp out, I run around the enemy team, I warp out, I run around the enemy team, I warp out. You don't want to do that. Can you occasionally get a loop in when your team just got wiped and you're alive and you're going to go, I'm going to go to a loop and get maybe 8% ult charge off of it because I definitely have time to run a loop before my team is back ready to do stuff, but not just to run a loop, but also to reset up to be ready to actually engage them at a gentle off angle that I can sustain once this once my team is back, yes, you can do that. But that should basically be pretty much it for your standard ladder play. My whole team got wiped, but I'm alive. Let me just force an extra little loop in here, and let me find targets where even if they all turn, I'm only going to be 3v1ing for a second, not 6v1ing, and preferably, not against Casties, Roadhogs, things that could mess you up like that. So that would be, do not run loops with her. It'll take your low damage even lower. Instead, you want to hit gentle off angles. If your team is pushing down main, you can stand just a little bit off to the side at like a 45-degree angle, preferably with cover, even better with high ground, and just shoot. Just shoot around the Rhine shield. You don't have to do the super deep behind them thing. You can if you've got time to set up there, but if you do that, only do that if you have time to set up, and don't force that so hard that you get forced out. You want to contribute damage like you're a budget Soldier 76. Just contribute more damage. That's not strictly the right way to play her at all times, but that is the right way to play her most of the time on ladder, because it helps to overcome her damage limitation and it gets her more ults. And yes, your team is still going to do okay at winning when you EMP, and her team is going to, an EMP is where a lot of this year's value is currently tied up. So we would like to get our ults. We would like to do that. That's going to work pretty well. Just hit those gentle off angles. Hit them from a place where your team can continue to sustain you. They can hit you with harm orbs, with Ana shots, with BAP shots, that sort of thing, but you can shoot around the Rhine shield. Yeah, scouting and health packs is better than running loops most of the time, but again, basically don't run loops. And again, your real standard play should be like 45-degree off angle, maybe 90-degree off angle with high ground if you can get it. Basically, you want to be able to sustain while doing moderate damage to them, not while threatening lethal. Just pump damage into them at an angle that's hard for them to answer. Okay. So, does Overwatch 2 fix Sombra's problems? Is kind of going to be my last topic here, and then I'll catch up on chat real quick. And the answer to that, I'd say, is kind of. In terms of what we get from her, no, it doesn't fix her problems because she's way too powerful. And what we saw of Overwatch 2, she's way too powerful. EMP takes away everyone's health. It only does a 1 second taking away of abilities, but it takes away a bunch of health from everyone. And then it also leaves everyone with the hack debuff that causes Sombra to do, 40% more damage to them for 6 seconds or something like that? No. No, that's not less frustrating. That's just too powerful. So no, yes, it's less frustrating to not lose your abilities, but it's going to be so easy to combo. Hey, EMP takes away all your stuff for 1 second, and then you guys have no health, and we just blow you up. That doesn't really work. She's just been balanced to be too powerful. I get that they wanted to make her less frustrating, and the hey, people only hacked for 1 second does do that in some ways, but I think that's sort of partially undone by she's still a hero that has invisibility, and the way her interaction between stealth and, stealth hacking is going to work, where you don't really come out of invisibility while going for the hack type thing. No, that is not really going to be a significantly less frustrating experience, especially with the raw power they're giving her to deal with support. So I can see the direction that they're trying to go. I see where they're trying to go with it. It's definitely not the answer unless they just take away raw power from her in that state. She probably flat out shouldn't be allowed to hack and maintain stealth there, though. Or to, maintain stealth until the hack is over. That probably needs to not happen. But we'll see what ultimately does. I don't have too much to say on the Overwatch 2 topic, because ultimately there's still so much that we don't know in terms of the rest of the roster, that sort of thing. Yes, having her be more damage does fix the biggest part of her issue. Once she hacks people, she'll do more damage to them, and that does fix the biggest part of her issue. I'm really just objecting to that ult, as well as to sort of her interactions with stealth there while hacking. So I think if they tune down her damage just a little bit when she's hack targets, probably tune down the amount that hacking increases her damage, but just a little bit, soften that ult, and then what was I saying there? Soften that ult, probably shouldn't take away that much health, clearly, and then I'd probably also say her damage multiplier from hacking someone needs to be a little bit lower. But hey, we'll ultimately see how that goes. So that's what I wanted to cover. I've got a lot of chat to catch up on, so we'll do that here. If you guys have your own questions, comments, discussions to get in there, throw them up in chat now. Otherwise, we'll be doing some catch up. Would be good to see a Sombra mini guide. She's not a terribly popular hero, and you can see that now. I would usually have about twice this many viewers for a discussion response video, and I don't. And I notice the same thing when I do Sombra VOD reviews. People don't like her, and that's fine. I might do a Sombra mini guide for her at some point anyway, but she's not popular, as you can see. To talk, who is Sombra's ideal duo queue with? Tracer, Bastion, or Moira? Tilt your opponents to leave the game. You basically got to pick every fight. I see. I see. Nerf ball and Doomfist when he's swimming. Yep. Buff sinking Doomfist, but nerf swimming Doomfist. I hear ya. I hear ya. Jump on the Santa Inc. review bandwagon for viewers' views. I see, I see. Maybe Lucio mini guide. Oh, you're learning Lucio and you want a Lucio mini guide. Fair, fair. Okay. At Temporal, are Sombra loops things from the past like Winston counter Sim? I mean, Winston still sort of does beat Sim because you see Winston comes out. Like, if you look at, I've done lots of, if you look at much professional play or even look on this channel at the Northeastern games, you're going to see that on Night Market, Winston's come out as the off tank pretty frequently to beat up on Sim comps. You bring the Winston because you're expecting another Brawl comp, and the Winston is nice for that, and the other Brawl comp has Sim, so maybe Winston still does counter Sim. But sort of, yes. It's sort of a thing from the past when Sim didn't ramp up her damage in that same way that was an incredible problem. Yeah. Sorry, Sombra loops. Are Sombra loops from the past? They're sort of from the past, yeah. The first take on how to play her was the Sombra loops, and a lot of people never got past that. As people play the game, study the game, they get better at the game, they get a better understanding. That one stuck around way too long. Sombra also made a little more sense doing that when hacking health packs was a little more impactful, gave ult charge, that sort of thing. The only counterplay to Sombra in metal ranks is to convince her team that she's useless and let opposite team bully her until she swaps. That's not true. You can beat her, but yes, it is hard. Um, isn't it funny, pal, what I can and can't say? I only said it once. I'm pretty sure we'll be safe there. The fact that she gets to play so high risk but not actually get eliminated for it just feels bad. Exactly. That this stealth hero can show up anywhere and try to hack you and then just gets to get out for free. It's not actually for free, but it feels like it's for free to the team that it's being done against. Isn't going to feel good. Uh-huh. Celeste says Sombra is hotter than Widow. Fight me. Okay. Okay. Was it hacked Mercy? You duel Sombra until she translocates away because you have better aim. There you go. The top and bottom of ladders are the same. Temporal, you already did the VOD on that? I see. I'm being trolled. Okay. Give the person being hacked a sad face. I should have. My stick figure should have had a sad face there. If Reaper times a flank wrong, he can still get an elimination and escape a decent amount of the time. If Sombra presses an off angle and gets forced out at the wrong time, oof. Eh. Sombra's bad design, no trolling, stealth and disabling what makes the heroes fun to play is just awful. Should never have been in the game. Just has Brig syndrome. I mean, I would be okay moving her to the support category. Like, I'm still good if we want to go with original Sombra. Give her a low damage weapon, let hacking health packs give ult charge again, and then yeah, maybe we make this hack. Maybe you can do just that. You might be able to do just that. Because it means your opponents in the 2-2-2 world are having to give up a support to get her. And I think it's okay for a support to have that disable ability. Especially when it means their other support is going to get, like, no peel. Yeah, that might be okay. But if not, you can still adjust hack similar to how they're adjusting it in Overwatch 2. Um, yeah, I think stealth and disable is always going to be frustrating to play against, but let's be honest, snipers are frustrating to play against, and FPSs love, just feel like they have to include them. And in MMO type PvP, rogue type classes, assassin type classes are unfun to play against. They either do high burst damage, they have incredible stun locking potential that they get you without of stealth, and those are also unfun to play against. Like, some of these things are here and they're here to stay, unfortunately. And she was clearly inspired by the rogue type thing, and they didn't really give her a stun lock. They gave her a softer lock than that, and they also didn't give her high damage. So you could say it doesn't belong in an FPS, but our snipers really better. We tolerate them because they're real. They exist in the real world. I don't know that they're significantly more fun. They feel more fun because people understand them a bit better, but you could have made Sombra's weaknesses a little more pronounced. You could have not given her translocator, and a lot of the complaints about Sombra would go away if she didn't have translocator. She'd need something to compensate it, but something less frustrating than a escape for free card. Translocate is much more powerful than the re-vanish that most stealth classes get in MMO type PvP. Uh-huh. Sombra is Lucio but TPS. I can see that comparison. I can see that. Again, the question: are loops things from the past? I mean, they still happen is the problem. They are from the past, but they're mostly from a people didn't understand the game well enough yet. They're mostly from a time when also people didn't handle Sombras very well. So your Sombra getting an opening hack because people were worse at the game was a more viable strategy to greenlight your team pushing. So running a loop for Sombra to get a hack and then start firing makes more sense because if you had a good loop, your team is going to engage off of it. That's a lot less common now because people react to her a lot faster. Mm-hmm. It's annoying when you are eliminated and you see Sombra doing data entry on distant health packs while you respawn. I hear you. Thoughts on playing Sombra behind a Rhine Shield and not flanking? I wouldn't play Sombra strictly behind the Rhine Shield, though you could. It's really just bad. Um, it's probably slightly better than running loops, but I'd really prefer that like 45 to 90 degree off angle, like she's a casty, like she's a soldier, and just go, hey, my supports can see me to offer me support. I can still drag a diva away, but then I can retreat to my team easily, that sort of thing. All of that is going to work pretty well, work better. That softer angle where you can still get support, but you can just sort of just barely get around a Rhine shield on the other team is going to be better. Okay. You usually only flex Sombra to deal with Doom Balls and Zarya, and that's fine. That's a fine way to play her. That's valid for ladder, absolutely. But you're not going to really get good at playing her or playing her into a counter if you're just using her like that. And if that's not what you want, that's fine. But if your team needs you to play Sombra because your team is playing a lot of Zen Ball comp right now, and they need you to be able to play Sombra, Hanzo, Echo, things like that, well, you're going to need to work on your Sombra more than that. Hack now heals. Hack does not now heal. But when Sombra was first released, hacking health packs caused the health that the health packs restored to give Sombra ult charge. Uh-huh. Overwatch 2's take on hack, more damage taken is a fine middle ground. Yeah, it can be. I'm a little worried that it's a little too much support pick potential right now, but we will see. Teams of 6 Rhines would be great. Yeah, Translocator going with it is, I think, what really breaks her design. And then her damage low. Yeah. If you gave her higher damage but lower but no translocator, or you took away translocator but instead gave her an instant in combat vanish, but like it's an instant in combat vanish, but Diva could still immediately find you, people still have a chance to guess on you, that sort of thing, that would be much healthier. Winston can still find you, all that good stuff. Okay. I think that's going to wrap it up. If you guys are enjoying the content, please do drop a like. Consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. If you'd like to see more stuff like this, the best way to follow me, you can, of course, hit that notification bell here on YouTube. But one of the even better ways to follow me is to join my Discord in the description below. And in there, you can go ahead and scroll down to get notifications, and you can react to become a watcher. If you get a watcher, you will get pings when I go live, and you can see what topic I'm covering. Am I talking about how Sombra works, whether you should play or not? Am I reviewing someone else's guide? Am I doing a reaction video to Santa Inc., I guess, like Blah's asking me to? Am I giving updates to the collegiate scene, be that power rankings, tracking what happened, like, oh, hey, the team that won North American Contenders for basically the last 2 years lost and didn't win in collegiate. Collegiate is now better than Contenders confirmed. Things like that. Things like that. If you want to see what the topic is, you can obviously join that Discord, get those reactions, and then you'll be able to see if it's something that's interesting. You hop in here, comment, you get to pick my brain, that sort of thing. Or, hey, if it's not interesting to you, you let it go and you catch the next one. But I hope you guys have enjoyed. If there is any final questions, you can throw them up here. And not seeing it, I think we'll do it there. Thanks, guys.